Well, good evening, web designers. I hope you're all having a lovely rest of your day. I hope your weekend's going well. And with that being said, let's get started on some CSS and HTML coding. So if you all go to Savannah's Academy and you're taking web design, or you just stumbled across this video on this beautiful World Wide Web, I have a couple of times for my students to do. So we just got done with our HTML unit, and now we are going into our CSS unit, and we're just kind of hitting the ground running, and we're trying to teach everyone how to create a basic structured web page. So just one, not multiple, just one, just so people can feel out how to do so. However, I know people have issues or are having troubles with these things, and so we're going to go through these things together. So I have 3 assignments here. So I teach Savannah Arts Academy students. I have 3 assignments that I put up for my students called CSS SAA Pride 1, 2, and 3. And basically, it's going through the different parts of a website and how you can create a cohesive web page. And if you can create one cohesive web page, you can create a million of them. So I'm just going to step through all of these assignments all in just one big video, and hopefully it helps people who are either confused or want to learn more about CSS and HTML. So let's go ahead and get started. So my my GUI, or my the thing I enjoy writing HTML and CSS on the most, because the name is evading me, it's called Replit. Okay, so replit.com, you can see it up here. Pretty nice. This is a really cool start screen that they have. I already have an account, so I'm just going to log in. It's really easy to log in with this because if you have a Gmail account, if you have Facebook, Apple account, etc., you can just log in with those respective accounts, and here you are inside of my Replit. As you notice, I already have a couple of Replits I've created with my class and whatnot. So I'm just going to go up here to the top left-hand corner, and I'm going to create. Now, you can use Replit for many different things and many different languages, okay? So we're using it for CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. However, you can use it for Python, you can use it for C++, you can use it for C#. There's a whole bunch of ones you can do, but we're focusing on CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. So if you notice right here in my favorites, I have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript up here already. But if you don't have it, you just search HT, and it just shows up because it's the only language that starts with those letters. So you have this, and you can give your Replit a name. I'll name mine SAA Panther Pride, and I'll name it YT because this video is going to go up on YouTube, because I want people to see how you do this. So with any Replit, you start off with what they have, basically their base code, what they've partially filled in for you to kind of get started. If you're using some other type of program, I don't know why the name is evading me. Yeah, so like a Notepad++ or whatnot, then you might have a different view, but if you're following along, this is what it looks like. So here, I'm just going to take out all of this stuff right here in the body of HTML, just because we don't need that to write HTML. So if you are unfamiliar with how a HTML base document looks like, you have your HTML with the doc type right here. Then we have our starting and closing HTML tags, which create the HTML element. Then you have the head element, so you have the opening and closing head tags. And then you have all the stuff in between it. And then you have the body element with the opening and closing body tags. Okay? Pretty simple stuff. And then all this stuff up here, you want to keep it because the meta elements, which are these lines of code right here, are what tell the browser about your web page. It also helps to scale content with the device that they're on. So if you look right here, this attribute right here, called width equals device width, it's just saying, hey, the width of the web page should fit the width of the device. You should keep it in there. Title is what basically you put in the tabs of your browser. So if you look up here, this tab has Screencast-O-Matic, this tab has classwork for web design, etc., etc. Basically, whatever you put in between these opening and closing title tags are going to be what shows up in the tab of your browser. That's a mouthful. So I'm going to just say SAA Pride. Okay, and I'm just going to run it really quickly. You can't see it right now, but you will see it later. And then finally, you have this element right here called the link element. And this is actually how we're going to be infusing CSS into our HTML website, since we have multiple ways we can insert CSS on a website. You have internal CSS or cascading style sheets. You have external, which is the one we're using. And then you also have inline, which I highly do not recommend. If you want to know more about those, you can look this up yourselves. But basically, we want to keep that line in there as well, because this is what links this little style sheet CSS page right here to our HTML. So we don't have them both on the same page, which is what we call external CSS. So with that being said, the point of the assignment is to create a one-page website about SAA Pride. Now, of course, you can make this website about anything if you're not in my class, but if you are in my class, the purpose of this is to show off your SAA Pride. And the first part of the assignment asks for you to create a header. And I also ask you to create two tables, one with your A-day schedule and one with your B-day schedule, with your the names of your teachers, your classes, and the periods. I'm going to do a quick and dirty version of that today, just to get through it. But tables are pretty simple to do if you just look it up on Google. I'll do a quick and dirty example of what those look like. The second assignment says for you all to create the different sections that are normally associated with a website. So if we take a look over here at Amazon.com, which is a highly popular site. You all should know this. Oh wow, we have to do a, okay, they must think I'm a robot. We're going to continue on. If you notice, there are different sections of a website, and you've probably seen this all over whenever you're doing your interweb browsing. We have our header right here, which usually contains some type of image, insignia, or logo of a company. Then we below that we have our navigation bar. Then all the stuff in between there, up at the top, and the footer is what we call our main content. We can also call this our section content, our side content, etc. But for right now, I'm just going to say this is the main content. And then all the way at the bottom, we have what we refer to as the footer. Okay, so you have the footer, you have the main, you have the nav, and then of course you have the header. Okay, so those are the basic parts of a website, and that's what we'll be mapping out on our website today. And then the final part of the assignment is asking you to use float and positioning to position things on the sides of your website, and to position your logo at the top of your website inside of your header. Now, I will say your website will look nothing like this, as Amazon is a multi-billion dollar company, maybe even trillion-dollar at this point, with lots of very advanced engineers behind it making its website. I don't expect anyone in this class to create the next Amazon quite yet. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but for this class, it may be a jump off point, not necessarily a you're not necessarily going to be able to do this after the class. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I always do when I create a website is to map out the different parts of the website. So remember how I said, oh, the top of the website is the header, then the nav, then the main. Well, those happen to be the different elements that are necessary to create a web page inside of HTML5. So if I go in between body, which is where all of our content and all of our websites should be created in, I'm going to tab over and I'm going to start with our first element called the header element. And this is where all of our header content is going to go. So again, mirroring after Amazon, this is where all this stuff will go. So if we had a website that needed a search bar, it would go in the header. If we had a something that needed a cart, we put it there. Okay. And of course, Replit does a really good job. Once you've done the starting tag of any element, it will automatically create the closing tag of the element. It just helps you write it faster. So that's really cool. The next thing we're going to do is do nav. So nav is where our navigation goes. And again, just like with header, we do have it automatically create the closing tag after we've created the opening tag. So nav goes next. So again, with Amazon, you have the nav right up here, which is going in order. So if we remember, the next one should be main. Oh my goodness, you guys, you're so smart. We have main here. And so here we have our main. So this is where all this content is supposedly going to go. Now we're going to break this up a little bit later. But for right now, that's where our content's going to go. And then finally, when we're looking at a traditional website, we're going to do our footer, which is at the bottom or the foot of our website. Okay. So this is going to be the basic format of our website. Now, since I know what the project's going to be asking for, I'm also going to add in 2 asides. So aside is another type of element, in this case, a semantic element that basically asks you to put all the content on the sides of the website inside of them, just to section them out. And we're going to have 2 asides on our website that we make today. So we're just going to have them both. So in order, we're going to have our header, our nav, aside, main, and footer. Okay, so that's the basis of a website. And of course, when we run this, nothing happens because we actually haven't put anything on the page, but we've built out the containers in which our page is going to lie within. Okay? And that's going to be important. So first off, if we go inside the header element, just going to hit the ground running. We're going to go ahead and put an H1 element in here that just says simply SAA Panther Pride, because we are the Panthers and we have pride in our Savannah Arts Academy. Okay? So I'm going to create the H1 element. And of course, just like we did with all the other ones, it automatically creates, can't talk today, automatically creates the opening and closing of our element. So here we're just going to say SAA Panther Pride. And so that is within the H1 element, so that is fine. And then when we run that, we see over here inside of our output window, which is why I love Replit, we can see how it looks on our web page. So pretty simple. Nothing too hard, nothing too simple. And of course, if you wanted this to be a shorter or a lesser font, you could change this to an H2, and that will decrease the font slightly. But I do like the big font of H1, so I will keep H1 there. And H1 just simply means a heading, so it is the heading of your website. So any heading on your website, you will want to encase inside of the H1 element. Okay? Next up, we're going to do not nav. Actually, I'm actually going to go down to main first, because in the assignment that I gave out, we did do our main first, and I will stay true to that. So I will be doing our main first. So I'm going to go ahead and do a table or 2 tables. Whenever you do a table, you always want to do the table element. Okay, you always want to wrap your table in there. Because it just helps to section off your tables from one another. You also, when you do your, when you want to put a title over a table, you want to use what we call the caption element, okay? And the caption element is only used within the barriers of a table element. And this is what you're going to use to basically give a title to each of your tables. So I'm going to say, A Day Schedule. Because if you notice inside the assignment, this is about your A-day schedule and your B-day schedule, but you're putting it in table form. Okay, so I'm going to put here my A-day schedule and give it a couple of categories. So once we've gotten that down, now we just have to build out the table. And if you all remember from past lessons or from your lots of navigating the internet, you'll know that tables are built out by rows. So we have this cool element called table row, or TR, and that is how you're going to build out your table, by the rows. Okay, so within your rows, I'm blinking right now. Nope, I'm good. You're going to put in either table headings or table data. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tab over here. You notice how I'm tabbing everything as well. So you do want to make sure you're tabbing everything correctly. Whenever you're nesting or putting an element within an element, you always want to tab it over one so that it kind of looks like almost like it's cascading. And that is just good coding practice. That's why I do it, and you all should mirror that because it will make your code look a lot less jumbled up and hard to read. Okay. So the first part of a table should always be the first table row with the element called TH, which stands for table heading. Okay, so table heading is how we put the headings of our table up here. So here I'm going to create, how am I going to do this? I'm going to say class. Okay, so that's going to be my first one. And I'm going to create another table heading. And I'm going to say time, and then I'm going to create a third one called period. Okay, I'm also going to make sure these are all tabbed on the same way. I'm just going to tab it over like that. Awesome. And now when we run this, you'll see, since we put these all in order, so the first thing on our HTML is SAA Panther Pride, and now we have our caption, which as you can see is centered over our table, and then we have three table headings: class, time, and period. And as you notice, whenever you put things inside of a table heading, it is bolded. So that is why it is a heading, and that's what differentiates a heading from a data. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Now, to make this table work and to not sit here and do a table all day, I'm actually going to copy what I've done up there, and I'm going to just create another table row from here. And if you actually run it like this, you'll see that we have two class, time, and periods, because again, we build out a table via rows. But instead of using TH, I'm just going to change these THs to TDs, which is called a table data, which is basically for the regular data that isn't as important as the heading. Okay, and just noticing when I change those, now you see the class, time, and the period are no longer bolded because they are now just data. And of course, when you do one thing to one tag, you do it to the other. So you have to make sure you have TD on both sides. And instead of doing class, I'm going to say planning, because the class that I have for my first period is actually my planning period. So I'm going to do planning there. The time, instead of giving a specific time, I'm just going to say early morning, if I can type. And then the period, this is first period. Okay, so if we run this, you'll notice how my table now looks. You see I have class, my first class is planning, the time is in the early morning, and the period is first period. Now my table is a little backwards because I probably should have put period 1 and then 2, 3, 4, and then put the class and the time, but I'm just going to keep it this way because you know it has a little bit of character. So like before, I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it under here. And you notice I'm still within the confines of my table element because I don't want you all to have to type all this stuff out every single time when you don't have to. Okay. So I know that my second period on A days is my digital design. All right. I have my digital design, and this is going to be like, I'm going to say mid-morning. Okay. And this is my second period. Okay, cool. Now we're going to do the same exact thing we've been doing this whole time, and we are going to do this. Now my third period on A days are going to be web design. Okay, and this is going to be what I call late morning. Okay, and I'm going to do, this is third period. Okay, and again, since we already have the first one copied, we're just going to keep on pasting it. Okay, and then my fourth period of the day is called digital design as well, again, and then this is going to be late afternoon, or not late afternoon, early afternoon, and this is my fourth period. And here, once you built this out, all your rows, when we run this, you see we have a pretty convincing table. Now, of course, if you know anything about HTML and CSS, you know that tables do not come standard with borders, because borders is a stylistic thing. Thus, it is under the jurisdiction of CSS. So we will not be able to, with the confines of HTML, add borders yet. However, with the beautiful powers of CSS, which we'll do in a second, we'll be able to add some beautiful little borders on here. Okay, so that is pretty easy. Now we're just going to do that again, and this time I'm going to copy this whole element. So I'm going to copy everything inside the table element. So you see all that, and this is all still within the main element. Okay, I'm going to copy all this, go below this table right here, and paste it all again. So now we have this table element, and now we have this table element. Okay, you see that? So now I'm just going to change some things around. So I'm going to do B-Day schedule. I'm going to keep the heading the same because it's the same heading. And now I'm just going to change the stuff around. So first off, I start both of my days, A-Day and B-Day in planning. So I'm going to keep that the same. However, on B-Days, instead of starting my day with digital design for my first actual class, I actually started with web design. So I'm going to change that to web design. And now for both my fourth and fifth periods, I have what I call IDT, or Intro to Business and Technology. So I'm just going to say IVT. And again, since they happen on the same time, I don't have to change my third period, I don't have to change my fourth period, and I don't have to change my mornings. Although I probably should just take out these periods right here. Awesome. And now when I run, now we have two beautifully formatted schedules, the tables inside of HTML. Okay. I'm also going to do one thing is add a break in between did the wrong thing. A break in between my tables. So if you look right here, I have my table 2, which is my B-Day schedule. That's right here. And you see up here, I have my table 1. And I'm going to put what we'll call the break element in between them. Because if you notice right here on the side, we don't have much of a space between them. They look kind of crowded. When we add that break in here, this is going to mimic a break in the text or a line or enter. So we're going to put that in there. And I'm actually going to add our first comment here, which if I remember correctly, nope, it's going to be thank you. All right, this is a line break. When we run that, you see here now we have a space in between this. So that is how we add in a line break into our code. So now we have a little bit of a break there. That's pretty cool. Other than that, I'm going to go down to our footer and I'm going to simply put in what we call the P element. Okay, and I'm going to say this website was created and maintained, and is maintained by Satchel Holmes Williams. And let me see if I can do it. Can I do and copy awesome 2022. So this is a standard footer for a smaller website. Of course, I'm not a big multi-billion or trillion-dollar company like Amazon, so my footer is going to be a lot simpler than theirs. So I just said that this website is created and maintained by myself. And if you notice, I have this little piece of actual code and copy semicolon, which is actually, when you look at it in your output window, going to create a copyright symbol, and so copyrighted 2022. So when I run this, you notice how now instead of having the and copy semicolon, I have a copyright symbol. So this is the basis of my website. Nothing too shabby, nothing too, grand, but we can make this look a lot better by moving over to our CSS and adding in a couple of elements. Before then though, I'm going to actually add one more thing, which is going to be an image. So one of the things I told you in the beginning was you do need to make sure you have an image inside of your header, because that's what websites have. I mean, go to any website. So if you go to walmart.com, up in the heading, guess what? They have an image. If you go to apple.com, guess what? They have an image. We go to even sccpss.com, which is of course our lovely school system. It's pretty standard to have it up there in the left-hand corner. So we're going to do the same thing here, but instead something Panther related. So I'm going to quickly look up Panther image, and since I want to be transparent, because I don't want our background to contrast with it, I want to say transparent. Okay. And so now I'm going to look at the images and see how beautiful different things are. I love that image. Can I buy that? Or can I use this? Okay. I like this image. Can I download it? Did it let me download it? Oh my goodness, it let me download it. That's so cool. Awesome. I'm going to use that. So the way that you can use images like this inside of your website is by the following. So first off, I'm going to put in my header the image element. So image element is just img, and then what I like to do is I like to put in my / and then my ending greater than symbol. And then within here, I'm going to call the attribute src equals, and then we put quotes in there. And then what we do here is we have to call an image in between these quotes. Now, normally, before we have the power of Replit, we would have to get an image from the internet and just call that image address. However, with the power of Replit and with most web servers, you're able to just call the image from your web server. So here I'm actually going to go here, put this to the side of my desktop. Yes, my desktop is very messy looking. And I'm going to put this image right here in my files that I can now call inside of my HTML. So you notice this says panther-free-png.png. This is a mouthful. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to hit these three dots. I'm going to say rename to something easier. I'm just going to say panther.png. And when I enter, now it is simply panther.png. And so now, instead of me having to go to the internet and finding a link to a PNG or an image, all I have to do is type in panther.png. And you notice how when I start typing it, Replit is smart enough to see that we have that inside of our, web server. And so now when I run this, nothing happens. Okay, what do we do wrong? Let's diagnose a couple of things. So first off, we're going to do panther.png again. When I run it, it does not like that. Now, when I preview it, it does show up. That is weird. That is weird. SRC image, is it href? Image SRC. Yeah, it is SRC. That is weird. So apparently it cannot see this image, which is weird. So let's just go ahead back and look for another image then. That is weird. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select another image. Maybe something a little less picky. Maybe I'll go SAA, which is actually Savannah Arts Academy logo. All right, these have to work. It won't be transparent, but at least it will look decent. So which one do I want to use? So traditionally, you go to the website. And then here, if you notice, we have this image. We right-click it, and then we say copy image link. It might also say copy image address on your browser. It just depends on the browser you're using. So now, instead of putting in the name of an image, we just put in that image address. So if you notice right here, we have this, and we run it. Now that works. That is weird. Sometimes in your code can act very weird. So this is a good point to see about troubleshooting. Sometimes images won't work for many different reasons. I might have to troubleshoot why that's not working later and then maybe give you an update. But for right now, we're just going to use the Savannah Arts logo since it seems to be working with us well. Okay? So with that being said, now let's go over to the beautiful CSS. So our CSS or style.css page over here, it only has one selected element or selectors, which is HTML and body, which is basically saying that the width and the height of the page should be 100%. If we take this out, it won't do anything because automatically it will be 100% of the page. But I'm just going to undo it because, you know what? Why not? So the first thing we can do here is to center everything. I love everything to be centered on my page. We're going to keep the tables where they are for now, but we're going to center our heading. So we have our header right here, and then we're also going to center our footer right here. So if you notice when I make this a little bit bigger, they are not centered, but we can make those centered very easily. So since the SAA Panther Pride H1 is inside of the header element, all I have to do is type in header, do my open and closing brackets, and of course when we do one bracket, it automatically opens the second, and all I have to do is call what we call one of our properties, which is called text align. And then text align has three different values. It has text align right, text align left, and text align center. So I'm going to do center, and then always remember to put your semicolon after any CSS statement. And when we run this, nothing happens. Actually, no, hold on. Is it doing that weird thing? It is. Okay. So the reason why it did not show up is not because of any mistake of mine. It's because Replit is acting very weird. So it only shows your updates after you've put it inside of a new window. This is also a good way to show off our little title from earlier. So if you notice up here, when we put our SAA Pride up here in the title element, up here you have the SAA Pride where we put it. So like I said before, it does show up inside the tab. So here we've done that. So all we have to do now is go back to our style.css, copy what we've just done, and we can do the same exact thing, but instead of doing it in the header, we can now do it in the footer. So now we've got footer, we run it, and then once we've run it, all we have to do is go over to our new tab, refresh it, and now you can see that now our footer and our header has now been centered in the middle of the page. Okay, and we'll deal with this image a little bit later because it's not that important. Now, the other thing you might want to do, let's say you don't really like how these tables look, is actually to center the tables, which actually isn't that bad of an idea. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. One way I think is the easiest is to assign these tables what we call a class, and then stylizing the class. Okay, so the way that CSS works is when you are calling an element, it will then change every single element on that page with that same name. So we have an element named header that is wrapped around our SAA Panther Pride, and we have an element called footer that's wrapped around our text down here in our footer. If we just call table and then did styling to the tables, that means any table on our website is going to be styled in that manner. But what if we have a table inside of our website we don't want to be styled in this particular manner? Well, then that's where classes come in. You can give multiple elements a class, and then everyone with that class is then styled instead of everyone with that same element. So that's how I'm going to choose how to stylize this. So here, I'm going to actually go back to my HTML, go to where I have my first table element, my starting tag, and I'm going to do class equals, and I'm going to do center, if I can spell it correctly. And then here, I'm going to go down to my second table. Remember, we have our second table after that break, and we're going to do the same thing. Class equals center. And so now we can go back to our style.css, and instead of calling table, we just have to call .center. So whenever you have a class, you always want to call it with a period before it. And that's how our CSS and HTML knows that this is a class. So anything that is an element, aka anything that goes in between here, these little things right here, can just be called by their name naturally. But if it is a class that you have denoted through here, it has to have a period before it. And then we do the same thing. We do our opening curly brackets, and of course Replit automatically creates our closing. So once we've done that, now we're going to do the same thing we did above. So we're going to do text-align, and this is going to align text into the center. So we do center, and then we do our semicolon. So now we're going to run it, go over to our other page, and we're going to refresh. And guess what? Nothing actually happened to these tables. Now, if you did notice, it did actually center the text within the table. So now all the text is centered instead of just the headings. However, the physical tables did not center like the rest of the page. And you may be wondering, is that by design? And yes, it is. So the way that they do tables is that tables are actually not something to be centered with text align, because text align center only centers text. And currently there is no efficient way to actually center tables on an HTML or CSS document. But there are ways around this. So if we actually go to the internet, let's just clear out a couple of these tabs here. If we go to the internet and just search center a table CSS, and this is how you might look up something that you don't know in CSS, which I recommend you do. If we click at the first link at W3 Schools, this is a very reliable link, and we do a try it yourself, you'll see how I've actually done the same thing they did, and we have this thing called table.center, and then we have margin left auto and margin right auto. Simply put, this is going to make the margins, which are always outside of the elements, go auto to the right and to the left, thus centering them. Okay, so if we actually go back to our code, we have .center. We don't have table.center, which isn't necessarily for this part, but we can do table.center. All it does is say all the tables, which within the table elements on our page with the class center will now have these stylings. But here, since the only thing on our page is center, which is our tables, I don't have to put table, but you can choose to do so if you would like to. Okay, so here we're going to take out text align center because we actually don't want our text to be centered. We want everything to be, well, left aligned, which is the default. So if you notice how now planning, digital design, web design, late morning, etc. are now centered, but when we refresh it with the new stuff, now everything is back to being left aligned. Okay, so that's how it affects it. So instead, we're going to do what they did, which is margin left, auto, colon, semicolon, and then we're going to do margin right, auto, semicolon. So now when we run this along, now we've centered. So when in doubt, use the internet. It's there for a reason. So now I want to do some quick styling before I go over too long because I don't want you all to be bored by this video. So we're going to do a little bit of styling with our heading now. So we're just going to change the background color, and we're going to also change the color of the text. So how do you change background color of the header? Well, you just say background dash color. And then this color, I'm going to make it black. But since the text is black, that's going to hide our text. So we also have to change the text color to something else. So here I'm going to make the color, which changes the text color, silver. So now when I run this and I refresh this page, now as you can see here, our whole entire header has turned black and our SAA Panther Pride is now a beautiful silver. And now we can kind of do something very similar to our table. So here, if we go over to, actually no, not a table, our footer. If we go over here to our footer, we can also make the background color black and the color silver as well. And what I'm going to do here is, instead of me working harder, I'm going to work smarter, and I'm just going to copy what I did up there and my header. And so now when I refresh the page, now we have a inverted footer as well. And I'm also going to, because I don't like how small the font is in the footer, I'm also going to call a property called font size. And what font size does is it allows you to change the size of the font. So here, the default font size for my browser is around a 12-point font. I'm going to make the size of my footer 16px, which is a 16 pixel font. Excuse me. Now when I run this and I refresh my page, nothing happened. Now why didn't anything happen? Maybe the default is actually 16 and I just didn't know it. So when I run it now, okay, so you saw how it got bigger. Okay, so maybe the default font for this one was 16. Okay, awesome. And then now I'm going to go over to the header. I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I am going to make this a little bit bigger since it is, well, our header text. So I'm going to make this 24 pixels of font. And now when I refresh the page, it got a little bigger. Okay, so now to handle these tables, which you're all probably waiting for because they do look like a sore thumb without beautiful borders. So if we actually go down and call in a table, so remember we encase all of these in tables, we can do this beautiful property called border. And border has 3 different property values. You have the weight of the border, you have the color of the border, and you have the type of border. Okay, so we always start out, for me, I always start out with the weight of the border. So weight is basically the size and how big it is. The bigger the number, the bigger the weight, the smaller the number, the smaller the weight. Okay, so I always start with a standard of 5 px borders, which is just a pretty standard size for a border. I always start off with a black border because it's pretty standard, and I always start out with what we call a solid border. And let's just see what these attributes look like. We run it, and now we go up to our, and look, we have a border around our table that is 5 pixels in weight. It's black and it's a solid border. Now let's change a couple things. So what if we made this 50 pixels? Now we run it, And now we see the borders are a lot thicker, a little too thick. I think I'm going to go back down to 5. Now let's change the color. Let's say instead of black, let's do pink. Okay. We're going to run that and refresh it. Now we have beautiful little pink border. So of course you can change this to anything. I'm going to change mine actually to silver. And you'll see why in a second. And then you can also change the type of borders. So you have solid borders, dashed borders, and dotted borders. So I'm going to do a dotted border just to show you all how to see it. So I do dotted, and you have a dotted border. And then you have dashed borders, and then when we run that, you have a dash border. Okay? Pretty simple stuff, y'all. I will go back to a solid border because I think it looks the most professional, and it's usually what we're akin to when we look at borders. So we're going to do that. That's pretty cool. Awesome. So now what I'm going to do here is actually show you why this is only affecting the outside. So remember how inside of our HTML, which is really important for diagnostic reasons, actually I'm going to refresh the page so we get the solid border again. Thank you. We only selected the table element. Remember, the table element is what wraps around the element that is our table rows and our table data. Okay, so really what you want to do is, instead of just selecting table, you also want to select table data and table heading, because remember this right here, the class, time, and the period, these are all a part of our table heading, and all of these texts in here that are not bolded in center are a part of our table data. So when we select all of these at the same time, which is simply just putting table, comma, td, comma, th, now we're saying we want to wrap this border that is solid, silver, and 5 pixels in weight around all these elements. And when we run this, we go over to SAA Pride, and now we have borders around everything. Now, of course, the question is, how do we make sure that the border becomes one border that we normally look at in tables? Well, there's this cool little property called border collapse. So border dash collapse. If you notice here that Replit is having a great time recommending that's what we're supposed to do. So here we have border dash collapse, and then the property value we should have is called just collapse. And when we run this and we go on to our Panther Pride, now we have a beautiful table with the standard single line borders around everything. So our website's not looking too bad, huh? You know, I mean, this isn't the worst website, but we can make it look so much better. So first off, let's add a little bit of color to those cells, okay? We're going to go back to background color. And now we're going to make the background color black, similar to how we did with all of our other background colors. So when we make this black, not everything is black, which means that inside of here, we're also going to have to change the color to, you guessed it, silver. So color always affects the color of text. So instead of having font text, or not, font color or text color, it's just color. And color is always to be associated with the color of the text. So now we have our text in this beautiful silver with our silver border and then our black background. Yes, this is a very boring looking website, but again, I'm here to help you fill in the lines so you can make this look so much more pretty and so much more inviting than what I am doing. I'm just showing you how you can use different elements and different properties to stylize your website. So now you take the crayon and you draw in all the beautiful colors you want. The other thing I want to do is change the font size. So I'm just going to do this generally across the table, make it all 20 pixels so that everything's looks bigger, because I do wear glasses and I cannot see those very small letters. I'm also going to do something where I'm going to add in padding. Now padding, when I run this, and I'll go ahead and refresh this right here. When you look at padding, padding affects the insides of all of our elements. So if you notice, this is our table heading, table heading, table heading, table data, table data, table data, table data, all this is table data. Padding affects the inside of these. So it's essentially going to give us more space in between all of our elements, just so that we don't have this, you know, these no gaps. It's kind of what we did earlier between our tables, but we're doing it within our actual table. So here, let me show you what it does. So we can do this explicitly, or we can do it kind of a more shorthand version. So the explicit version of padding would be, not explicit, but like my words, I'm getting confused about them. The more the one that is more directive, I don't know, it's really hard to speak today, is padding right, colon, padding left, colon, why are you doing that? Padding bottom, dash bottom, colon, and then you have padding dash top, colon. Okay? So here we can put in padding in various forms. So here we can do, let's say 10 pixels of padding for the right. Let's do 20 pixels of padding for the left. And then let's do 50 pixels of padding for the bottom. And then only 5 pixels of padding for the top. And when we run this, you notice a couple things. So, if you notice, our padding top is 2 pixels. You notice how small the gap is between the tops of our words and how everything else is so much bigger. You notice how the bottoms of all of our words are so much bigger because we put our bottom at 50 pixels of padding, okay? So, the other way we can do this is we can just simply say padding, colon, semicolon, and then just put our 4 values in a particular order. So when you're doing padding, padding always starts at the top and then goes clockwise. So top, first value is top, second value is right, third value is bottom, and then fourth value is left. So top, right, bottom, left. So start at the clock, at the 12 o'clock, right, bottom, left. So let's just go in 10. So we're going to make the top 10 pixels, the right 20 pixels, the bottom 30 pixels, and the left 40 pixels. And when we run this, well, we should see that the left has the most. Now, it does. Okay, good. The left has the most. Now, some of these look a little weird for some reason. I'm not sure why. But we do see that the top has the least. So notice the difference between how the top of all of our elements look versus the bottom, which is our 30. Awesome. So I'm just going to make these all the same. So I'm just going to make them all 10 pixels because I think that looks the best. You can also, if they're all the same, just put 10px for padding, and then it will automatically do 10 pixels of padding for each of them as well. So if I run this and then I undo all that, we just have this bit right here, okay? So now we have 10 pixels of padding and everything has a little bit more space in between it. So yeah. So that is that. Also, if you look right here, our caption has also changed its text color. I'm going to quickly change that caption color to black again because I think the color doesn't contrast well. The color silver doesn't contrast well with our white background. We're going to run this and then we're going to change that. So now we have a little bit better of a view of our beautiful little website. So the next thing we're going to add is actually our navigation bar. So there are many different ways in which you can add a navigation bar onto a website. Okay, and of course this is going to be in our nav element, so please put it there. The way that I'm going to teach you, I think, is the simplest way you can do a navigation bar. Of course, there are 50 different ways you can do this, and if you look up on Google, hence what I did earlier, you'll probably see lots of solutions as to how you can create a navigation bar. I'm going to show you the way that I think is the fastest, quickest, and most effective way to do so. So, first off, I'm going to start with the A element. So remember, the A element is how we create hyperlinks on our web page. And of course, when you go to any website, the navigation bar is just a whole bunch of hyperlinks inside of one place. Okay? So you go A, href, which is the attribute, something in quotes, Then we close that, and then we put something in between the opening and closing tags, and then we do our A right there. So this is the basically the look of any type of hyperlink. So here I'm going to say SAA homepage, because I'm going to link to the SAA homepage, and I'm actually going to search up SAA. So SAA SCCPSS home, and if I look right here, this is the home page of the SCCPSS website, because the purpose of our navigation, if you read the instructions on our assignment, is to give different links to different places on the internet associated with SAA. Like, for example, our girls for our cross country won their championships. So here I'm going to actually put down the website where they have some of the stats from our latest game. So here I'm going to actually go back here, and I'm actually going to copy all of this I just did, and I'm going to paste this. And instead of putting the href to our homepage in between the quotes for our href, I'm actually going to put down this right here. Okay, do this. And then instead of saying SAA homepage, in between the A's, I'm going to do SAA across country. And then I'm going to do this all again one more time, just 3, y'all. Okay. And I am going to put in between here an article on Jefe, which is one of our amazing Spanish teachers. So Jefe. SAA. So here, there's a teacher feature about him on our page. So here I'm going to copy this link, and I'm going to go right back over here to our href. And again, href is always where we put the links of our website, okay? And then in between our opening A tag and our closing A tag, we always put down our words of the hyperlink. So here we're going to put down SAA Jefe. When we run these, you'll notice right underneath our SAA Panther Pride, which is where the navigation bar should go, we have SAA homepage, SAA cross country, and SAA Jefe. And when we do this over here, we have the same thing. And when I click on SAA Jefe, guess where it goes? It goes to that feature I just put in that href attribute. So that's how we put it there. And when we go to cross country, guess what? It goes to that cross country page. Go back, go to home page. You get the point, right? So that is how we set up this. So whatever goes in between the opening and the closing A tags is going to be what people see or as a human, what you see on the page. Whatever goes in between the quotes and the href element is what you're going to actually go to when you click on it, okay? The other thing you can add here, which is not necessary, but I like, is the attribute called the target attribute, underscore or equals, and then do in quotes, underscore blank. And I'm just going to add this to the first one just to show you what it does. So you notice how when we go to all our websites like cross country, it overtakes the current screen you're on and you have to go back. Well, guess what? When we have the target equals blank attribute, it always opens up in a new page, which means we still have the page we're on. It's a really great attribute. I recommend you use it anytime you use a link, because I personally do not like it when links that I click on a page, unless they are actually going to a page within that page, overtakes the page I'm on. So, you know, but to each their own. I'm going to leave that link there. I'm actually going to copy it to all the other ones because I just really love how that works. But you can choose to omit it if you so choose to do so. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and now we have a navigation bar. So the reason why I like using this type of navigation bar is that I believe it does help to format it. So it already is naturally in the form of a navigation bar, like we usually can see it, because it is horizontal. Again, if I go back to all the websites in the beginning of this video, Amazon, Apple, Walmart, etc., all of the navigation bars are horizontal, which means they go horizontally across the page. You rarely see side or vertical navigation bars anymore. So this just naturally gives us a great starting point. And so now, since we have them inside of our nav right here, we now can do some styling on the navigation bar now. See how that works? This is so much fun. So now we're going to go down here to nav, because again, we're trying to focus on the navigation bar where we put our navigation links. And we're going to do the same thing we did above. We're going to do text align, and we're going to do center, because most navigation bars are centered. So we're going to do that there. And we're also going to give it a background color. And guess what the background color is going to be? It's going to be black. I know. You're tired of the black, but it's here to stay. So here we have this beautiful navigation bar that goes across our page. We have a little bit of styling errors I'm going to fix up eventually, but for right now, we're just going to keep it the way it is. Now, if you notice here, and it's really hard to see, the website, we have not yet changed the color of our links. And our links are also a certain type of way, which are kind of ugly looking. And I'm going to show you how to fix that. So first off, I'm going to go back to my HTML. And where I have my nav, for my nav bar, I'm actually going to go and give it a class. Class equals nav bar. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I like the name nav bar better than nav. I don't know why. I'm just a bigger fan of it. So I'm going to do .nav bar, because remember, all of our classes have a dot before them. And then I'm going to space, and I'm going to do a, and then I'm going to do my curly brackets. Now, this may seem confusing, but when you think about it, it makes logical sense. What I'm targeting on my HTML is any class with the class nav bar, which we only have one thing on our HTML with the class nav bar, which is our nav. So we could equally just put nav there, but I like nav bar better, so I'm going to put class equals nav bar and then do .nav bar in our CSS. Any A that is within the class nav bar, I want you to style it. And it kind of does the same thing like we did earlier with the tables, where if you have A's on your sheet or on your HTML that are not in the navigation bar, but you don't want them all to be styled the same, instead of just saying A and then everything, all the A's on your website have the same styling, you can specify which A's you want. In this case, all the A's that have the class nav bar. And since all these A's are in the nav, and the nav has a class nav bar, this now has been a part of the nav bar class. Okay? And I'll show you that in a second here. So if I do color, colon, and we do silver, of course, because duh, that's what we're going to do. We run this and we refresh it. Now you see our colors changed, because we've now selected all the A's, the A element, which creates hyperlinks within the nav bar, or the nav, really. Okay? And the way that I want you to look at this is, if I change this to nav, it will do the same as that thing, because they're the same thing. I just like the word nav bar better than nav. That's just my preference. You do you, I do me. I may be taking extra unnecessary steps, but you could just call it nav space A, and that would just be all the A's inside of the nav, which they should be, because this is the nav bar. So we're also going to do something about these pesky lines under here, because no one wants to have lines in a navigation. It may work in some places on your website, but not the navigation bar. So a really good property to take out those lines would be text dash decoration. Okay, and I just tap there just to make it completed, and then you say none. And when you say none, that basically takes away all the decoration of text that comes from hyperlinks, which is what we have on our page right now with the A element. We refresh this, and then you see those pesky lines are gone. So no more lines underneath our A's. And now this is looking way better and looking way more like a traditional navigation bar. However, one thing we have not yet to do is, of course, make this look a little bit more festive. And the first thing we need to do, of course, like we did with the table, is add some spacing, because this spacing is not doing what it needs to do, and we want to make sure that everything isn't all bunched up the way it is right now. So what we're going to do here is add Padding. Oh my goodness, you guys are so smart. We're going to add padding between these elements. Now remember, we don't need to add padding at the top or at the bottom because we just want to add padding to the right and the left because that's all that's really going to be on the horizontal part of it. So I'm actually going to go back to where we were. And I'm going to do padding dash right. Since we're only doing two of them, might as well just do it explicitly. I'm going to do 20px. And notice when I run this and I refresh it, now we have 20 pixels. You can't see this one because there's nothing by it for reference, but each of these has 20 pixels of padding to the rights of them. And now if I do that same thing, but instead I do padding left, now everything should have even more padding between them. Run that. And now we have even more padding. So now this is looking way better, y'all. It's definitely looking a lot more clean because now we can actually differentiate the different buttons from each other and click on them individually without having to worry about touching another one because they're right on top of each other. So that's a really good start to our stuff. And now we can do the regular things. We can increase the font size because again, you know, your navigation is an essential part of your website. You know, it should be very plain and very simple and very easy for people to navigate on your website. If it's not, then you're doing yourself a disservice and anyone in your target audience. Okay, so we're gonna make this a little bit bigger. Awesome. And then the other thing I want to do, which I have to actually do up here actually with the nav, is increase the padding at the top and at the bottom. So padding dash top, and I'm going to add 10 pixels of padding at the top. I'm actually going to add some pixels of padding at the bottom as well. So when I run this, you notice how at the top and the bottom of these, there's no padding, but when we refresh it, now there's padding. So the reason why I couldn't do it here is because this is selecting the entire navigation bar instead of only selecting the A's or the hyperlinks, which are these three lovely lot right here inside of the navigation bar. So sometimes in CSS, you'll be writing the right code, but you're not putting it in the right place. So if I do the same thing, padding right and padding top and padding bottom that I put in the nav and put it only to the nav A's or the A's within the nav, and I run it, look what happens. It doesn't do what I want it to do. It did not have the visual effect I wanted. So now you're going to be saying, what am I doing wrong? I follow all the rules. This should work, but it's not working. It's not because the code isn't right. It's because you didn't attribute the code to the right place. And what this actually does is, if you notice, when I go slightly above or out of the bounds of that navigation bar, which is the black, you can still click on the link. Why? Because you've increased the padding of it. So now you've increased basically the width of it. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and now we run it again. Now we actually have our beautiful little width right here. Now this right here is getting on my nerves. So what I'm going to do here is I think I'm going to have to, if I go to my header and I do margin :0 and I run that, that should take care of that. It doesn't. All right. I think I know exactly what this is. I'm going to try something really quickly. Header space H1 : margin 0 run. Beautiful. So what did I just do, y'all? Okay, first off, if you notice, I always try to keep my code in order in which they appear. I actually should put these navs above everything else. I'm just going to do that really quickly. I'm going to put the nav above everything else. I'm also going to put the footer at the bottom. This is how I like to order my code. In my CSS, wherever my HTML appears on my website, I want that to mirror it. So since my footer is at the bottom of my website and it's at the bottom of my HTML, I want my footer styling in my CSS to also be at the bottom of my page. So I already know approximately, and this may save you maybe a couple seconds when you're doing your coding, but it can mean a lot to people when reading your code to see where things are. If you just have everything just kind of nilly-willy out there, out of order, it can definitely make it harder to read. So if I'm actually being honest to myself, I'll change my caption and put that above table because, well, that's just how that works. Okay, center is a little bit special because it kind of comes after / before everything. It's weird, but we're just going to keep it right there. So now we have everything in order. So we have our header H1, nav bar, etc. So the reason why I put my margin 0 for my H1, and that's what solved our issue with it having that big old space in between there, is because H1, so some elements have automatic margins or spacing outside of the element that just come with it. Okay, not every element, but some do. Like if you notice right here, even inside of our window, you see there's like this implicit space between the SAA Panther Pride and our navigation bar. And that's because whenever you put things inside the header or H1 element, or any of the H's for that matter of fact, it's the header, so that stuff shouldn't be around it. So it automatically has a certain amount of margin placed around it so that things cannot be placed right under it. The problem with that is if you do want things to be placed under it, you just want the styling that it gives. You then have to go in and then target everything so that it can have the margin be 0. And that's the simplest I can really put it there. And the reason why I said header H1 is similar to why I said nav bar A. I'm only selecting the H1s that are inside of the header, which makes it easy to denote. So if I had another H1, but I didn't want the margin to be 0, I wanted to have that spacing above and below it, it will still be able to do that because it's only targeting the H1s within the header, which is why I have header space H1. So all the H1s in the header apply the styling. Make sense? Follow along? Got it? Okay. So when I run this, our website's looking kind of good. You know, I mean, our website, you know, not too shabby. There's only a couple more things I have to show you before we log off here, because it is well over, well, not well over an hour, but it definitely is a little bit over an hour, and I don't want to keep you all too long. So we're just going to add a couple more things to our navigation bar, and then we're going to go on with our floats and everything else and just quickly zoom through that. All right. So first off, go back to our CSS. We're going to start one more selector for our nav bar, and we're going to call it dot nav bar. It's going to be a mouthful, y'all. Nav bar space a colon hover. Now, what in the world does this do? This is a lot of conditionals. Basically, if you hover over a hyperlink, which is the A, that's in the nav bar, do the following. So I'm going to do this really simply, just so that we don't stay here all night. I'm going to say background dash color changes to silver, and my color of my text turns black. Simple. And when I run this and I refresh this, when I go over one of these, look what happens. When I go over it, and where have you seen this before? You've seen this on a lot of different websites, where when you hover over something, it will automatically change something about it. So in this case, when I hover over one of these A's in the nav bar, I've now inverted everything. So I've changed my background color to silver, and now the text is black. And it looks like some type of cool animation, but really you just change the property of it. Isn't that cool? That's so cool, right? And that's a simple part. You can play around with hover and do other things with it, like increase the text size, you know, play around with the colors, because obviously my website's very monotone, but it is what it is. This is how every website starts. So, you know, add your own styling as you wish. That's totally up to you. So that's really all I want to do with that. So this is not a bad looking website so far. We've done a lot together here. I want to do a couple more things, and then I will leave you all to it. So first off, I want to change this image to where it is beside my SAA Panther Pride and not above it. Now, honestly, this doesn't look that bad inside the website. It kind of positions itself perfectly, but it's not to my liking. So we are going to change it up really quickly. So here I'm going to actually go up to my HTML, and I am going to go up to my header, and I'm going to actually not do anything to it. I'm going to actually use the same thing I've been doing this whole time, which is going under here and do header image. And again, what is the same? Any image in the header, and there's only one, the Savannah Arts Academy of Visual Art and Performing Arts image, and I want you to follow to. First off, I want to make this a little bit smaller because it is a little big. I'm going to do width, colon, and I'm going to make this the width of, let's say 100 px, okay? And again, it'll make the width of the image 100 px. Refresh this, and it's a lot more manageable. See, that was actually pretty darn perfect. So cool. We're going to keep it that way. And basically, all I want you to see here is how you can position things. Okay, so there are different types of positionings. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the positioning that I want to use today is called position absolute, which basically says I want this element on my page to be positioned at this point on my page. So first off, we do position, colon, and you have different ones. Okay, if you actually look on here, you have fixed, and here initial, sticky, static, and you also should have absolute, which is here. Semicolon. And position absolute, it basically says I want this to be absolutely positioned this much from the left, or this much from the top, or this much from the bottom, or this much from the right. So here I'm actually wanting this to be positioned from the top a certain amount of pixels. I'm going to say top 100 px semicolon. And yes, you have to do both of these. You have to do both position absolute, and you have to give it some type of positional, so either top, bottom, left, or right, or a combination of both. And when we run this, you see something's a little bit wonky about it. Now, if you notice, it's actually doing what I want it to do. It's positioned 100 pixels from the top, but that's a little bit too far. So actually, I'm going to make this 100 pixels from the left. Ooh, now look at there. You see how it's 100 pixels from the left of the screen? I'm actually going to make this 50 pixels. Now, if I make this 50 pixels, what should happen? Should it get farther from the left or closer to the left? Down from 100 pixels. It should get closer. Because remember, we're only counting the pixels from the margin. So, we're only doing 50 pixels from the left margin. So if we have 100 pixels from the left margin, then it will go farther from the left. Just like how when we did 100 from the top, it automatically went 100 pixels from the top. Okay? If it was towards the bottom, if we did 100 pixels from the bottom, it would be from the bottom, from the right, from the right. So this is looking pretty okay. However, I do not like how it is all the way at the top, because remember, by default, every one of these positionals are 0. So right now it is 50 pixels from the left, but 0 pixels from the top, which is why it's just up here, just kind of floating. So we actually also are going to use the top property again, and we're going to just do 10 pixels from the top, because remember last time we did 100 and that was way too much. And again, a lot of CSS and HTML really is you playing around with the values, playing around with numbers, playing around with the different aspects of your website. Okay, well, don't be afraid to mess up, put in the wrong value, make it look all ugly, and then figuring out what I did wrong and just changing it. So we've played around with numbers, we saw things that didn't work, saw things that did work, and that is okay. That is the point of coding, is to mess up, figure out what you did wrong, and try to do it again. So here we're going to refresh the page, and you'll notice how, it kind of came down a little bit, but that isn't enough. I want to be a little bit further down. So instead of 10 pixels from the top, I'm going to do 20 pixels from the top. Let's just play around here. And here, that looks pretty good to me. I'm not going to complain about that. I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. Could we make it a little bit better? Could we make the sizing of it bigger? Sure. Could we make it a little bit less from the left or a little bit more from the top? Sure. But that, to me, doesn't look bad. It doesn't look bad. And I'm not going to complain about it. So, we're going to go to our last thing, our actual last thing, y'all, with floats, okay? So first off, let's just look at this website. It's kind of cool. Like, this is, and again, you can do so much with this. And this is just the base. if you really put your pedal to the metal, you could do so much more than this, y'all. Like, this is just the base of the website. Okay, just the base. But we're going to go over to our last thing, which is actually going to go back to our HTML and go to our two asides. So you notice how we filled in every other part of our website other than our aside. So we have our footer, we have our main, and we have our nav, and of course we have our header. The only part of our website we have not filled in, and of course as you can see here appropriately, is our aside content. Now of course you don't have to have an aside content. However, for this website you will have to, but not every website has them. Most websites just have the main, okay? But the side is really cool because you can put things on the side of your website, okay? So before I get started, I'm actually going to give these each a class. And I'm going to make one class equals left. I'm going to make the other one class equals right. Because remember, one of these asides are going to go on the left of my website, and the one is going to go on the right of the website. So that is why I am giving them the class left and right. So, and this makes it a lot easier, when I do my CSS, I can just do aside.left, which means all the asides of the class left. Or I can do aside.right, which are all the asides with the class right. And I, because I have human language, know that this is stylizing the aside on the left, this is stylizing the side on the right. Really pretty simple, right? So here, I'm just going to do something very simple, a callback to what we've done in the past, which is going to be a list. So I'm going to do an unordered list, which is with the UL element. I'm going to say, actually before that, I'm going to put in a P element. And I'm going to say things I love about SAA. And the first thing I'm going to do using the LI element is say the students. So I love the students. They're really cool. The second thing I'm going to do FBLA, because I love FBLA. The teachers, because of course the teachers are what make everything go round and round. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to say the arts, because of course the Van Arts Academy would not be anything without the arts, okay? And if we run this and just look at this on the website before we stylize it, you'll notice that it just kind of falls in line with everything else, okay? And because it's the first thing on here and we did not center it, it just kind of shows up on the left right here, okay? Pretty standard stuff, not too hard. And now we're just going to do the same thing, but to the right. And I'm going to say on the right, things I dislike about SAA. And I'm just going to take away all of these LIs and I'm going to say nothing. And I'm just going to put that down 4 times. Nothing. SAA is great. It's amazing. It's like one of the best schools in Georgia and definitely one of the best schools in Savannah-Town County public school systems. So we're going to run this. And again, because of how it is inside of our page, so we have our header, then our nav, then we have both of our sides up here, then we have our main. It just, because of just the default styling of it, it's going to go left align, because remember we had to change this to be centered. And then of course we have it on the side. And just to show you how it would look like without the centering, if we took out our dot center right here, and we ran this, everything would be to the left right now, because that's the default of any page, is to be left aligned. Just like any document you do is going to be by default left aligned. So here is where all the fun kind of starts. So right between where our tables are and our navbar are on our CSS, we are simply going to do aside dot left, and we're just going to start there. So what we're going to do to make this basically float, hint, hint, to the side of our web page, first up, we're going to restart this, make this go to the center, is by using a property called float. Float is our property. Our value is called left. And I want you to examine what happens when we do float : left. things start to float on the side of it, honestly. I'm actually going to do the same thing, but to aside dot right. So again, remember, we do aside, that is the element, and whenever we do dot, that means that right after that dot is going to be the name of a class. So aside dot right is going to be the aside with the class right. And remember that we gave both of our sides a class, one with left, one with right. And this time, instead of doing float colon left, we're going to do, of course, for aside dot right, float colon right. Simple language, right? You know, I always encourage y'all to use simpler language. Please don't try to be all fancy with it. It really doesn't have to be that complicated. Run, and look what happens now. Bazinga. We've now floated our side left on the left, and we floated our side right on the right. And now we can do a couple of things. So first off, I am going to do a little bit of diagnosing, and we're going to do borders. Now, I love to use borders as a way to diagnose issues in my code. Especially when it comes to floating, since floating, you can't always tell where things start and where things end. Putting border around things can really help you to see whether you've done something right or done something wrong. And I'm actually going to put this in my aside left, my aside right, and I'm actually going to finally create a main and do that as well. And when we look at it, you notice how the aside left is just this little box here. Our side right is this little box here. And then our main is this big old box. It basically covers everything. We don't like that. So I'm actually going to go back on something I did earlier, because you may not realize it, but when we did the centering of our tables, that is causing us to have a couple of issues. So when we restart this, now notice what happens. You see how everything kind of melds back together. And you can actually see how this element is floating right beside this element. Hence why we call it a float. We want to change it to where our main is kind of cinched in the middle, and both our aside left and our side rights are able to be basically take up 33% of the page. And I'm going to show you how. So first off, on our main, how do you cinch in the waists of our main? As if you're seamstress, you know what cinching in means. Bringing everything in is by controlling our margins. Similar to what we actually just did with our margin right auto, margin left auto, we're actually going to call in margin dash left, semicolon, and margin dot right, or dash right, excuse me, semicolon. But instead of giving it auto, since auto is unreliable, we're actually going to give it a value. And I'm actually going to make the value 20%. And you'll see why in a second. I'm going to give them both a value of 20%. And I actually want you to notice the changing in how the margins change. And this is the big deal about why coding is so much fun, because you can actually see what you're doing in real time, how it affects it. So you notice how right now, these margins stretch out the whole website. When we refresh this, notice the difference? Now, we basically cinched in or bought in the margins of our main from being this entire page right here to being cinched in or bought in 20% on each side. Remember, padding always affects what's inside of the element. Margins affect what's outside of the element. So this is a great visual view as to how you can look at your code. So, likewise, if we want to make these bigger, we can do a couple things. And I'm just going to tell you which way is better. Instead of giving it padding, because padding would work here, we're actually going to change the widths of these. So, let me explain. Go to aside right, and I'm going to do the width. And remember how we have this 20%? these are 20% on the margin right and left of our main, we're actually going to make the width of this 20% as well. So that basically the width of our side right and our side left ends right when our main begins. So when we run this, what should happen is this right side hand here should go all the way to the basically the outer layer of our main. When we run this, that's exactly what it does. A little bit of overlap. I actually might make our margin on our main 21%, just so that we don't have the overlapping as much. Run. And there we go. And so now I'm going to actually put back my center, because now we can actually see what everything's doing. So I'm just going to go back. Did I paste it? No, I didn't. I didn't copy it. So I'm going to actually do dot center. And so I'm going to do, dot center. Semicolon, margin, dash, left, semicolon, auto. Then I'm going to do the same thing with margin, dash, right, colon, auto, semicolon. And then when I run this, now our table should go back in the center. And now all we have to do, since we're done diagnosing, is take out our borders. Or you can leave them in, I mean, honestly, whatever floats your boat. Run this. And we have our website. Now, of course, there are a couple things you can still do to this to make it look a little better. Like you could figure out how to make this go all the way to the right over here. Or you can figure out how to make this come up from here. There's a lot of different ways you can do. I'm going to leave that to y'all. But this is not a bad start to a website. You have your middle content. Of course, all you have to do if you want to add things to this is go on your main and add things to it. You know, I can go over here and say, under my table, give it a P element and say, thank you for being a great learner. And when I run that, it's going to go over here. And remember, it won't go all the way over here because this is where I left. So it will start to the start at the leftist part of main, and all I have to do if I really wanted to make it all centered is go back to my main, and I could just do text align center, and now everything in my main is centered. Isn't that cute? Again, is it the best looking website in the world? It's debatable. Is there so much more you can do with CSS and HTML that I'm not even showing you here? Heck yes. Yes, there is. And I implore you, once you get this part down, to go to W3 Schools, which is actually what we've been using right here. There's lots of different tutorials everywhere. Learn HTML is a great source. There's so many different things you can do with it. And then same thing with CSS. And I implore you to look at what they have to offer and see what else you can do on this web page, how much more you can do. Because remember, pages like this, and this, and this, all start out looking somewhat like this. Every one of these. This is what you use. CSS, HTML, and the yet to be learned JavaScript. I hope this helps you all on your assignment. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, whatever you're doing. And I hope that this helps you all feel more secure in what you are doing and helps you all to be better CSS and HTML coders. Thank you all so very much. This is Mr. Holmes Williams, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.